Okay, guys, and we're back with another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest. I'm Seth from the Lonely Stoner podcast, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Michael Morales' recent victory over Gilbert Burns at the UFC Fight Night. Michael Morales stops Gilbert Burns in the first round. Michael Morales is actually coming off back-to-back first-round stoppages. He stopped Neil Magny and now stopped Gilbert Burns. Obviously, this was a Fight Night main event. And before this fight, Michael Morales was not in the top 10. He now has broken into the top 10 with that first round stoppage over Gilbert Burns. And to be honest, Gilbert Burns, he's at a point in every fighter's career. It feels like every sort of guy in the UFC that was at world level or fringe world level always goes through this period of their career where they're at the end of their career. They should have retired by now, but because they still have something about them, they're continuing to fight and they're getting put in bad matchups by the UFC because the UFC are ruthless and just care about building their next star rather than protecting their legend, right? UFC are ruthless in that sense. So literally, Gilbert Burns got fed to a young, undefeated fighter and got dog walked, right? Just got ran through. And like I said, it feels like this is a point that every UFC fighter, every world level UFC fighter comes to where you're physically able to get through camps, right? You're athletic enough, you're physically capable to get through camps, like I said. But mentally, you shouldn't be in these camps anymore. Like, once you get hit with a big shot, you're ready to go, right? And these fighters, they will talk about this warrior spirit, and I believe them. But it gets to a point where you've taken so much damage, your body and your brain starts to break down easier each time. It can't rebuild back as strong as it could before, and you're just deteriorating and deteriorating. We saw it with Tony Ferguson. Now, I'm not saying Gilbert Burns is Tony Ferguson, but it's 4 losses in a row for Gilbert Burns now. Right? And getting stopped like that, you don't tend to turn it around after that. When you're that age and you get stopped like that, that's normally, okay, I think it might be time now. But guys like this don't retire at these times. They continue to fight until they become unranked, and it gets to a point where they're losing to literal nobodies, and then they'll retire. But they should have retired at a moment like this. And I hope Gilbert Burns does. But of course, Michael Morales, he's an interesting fighter. He's clearly got a lot of power in his hands. I won't say reckless. I won't say Michael Morales is reckless. I would say he's aggressive. I think he's got an aggressive style. That's what he is. He's got an aggressive style. It's a pressure style. And like I said, he's got big power. He's clearly athletic for the division. He's in good shape. You can see that clearly, when he weighs in and when he fights. He's a well-built athlete. So it makes sense that he's carrying a lot of power there. And we'll see how high he can go in the division. I've not got the welterweight top 10 ahead of me, but he feels like he's potentially one of the higher upside guys, but also one of the lower low side guys, because in terms of the technique and the ability to manage a fight, even though he's coming off, two really impressive back-to-back first-round fights, a guy like Ian Gary, for example, Ian Gary feels like he's able to manage the chaos and manage the range and the distance and the fight in a better way. That's not to say, Michael Morales potentially could get to an Ian Gary and potentially stop him. But over 5 rounds, I wouldn't fancy him. And that's what I'm saying. You're going to have to beat these sorts of guys if you're going to be a top contender at the welterweight division. And I don't fancy Michael Morales to do that. But at the end of the day, he's a young fighter who's, maybe not young, but he's definitely in his prime. He's a fighter that's in his prime. He's still undefeated. So when you're in that position, you'll do a lot to keep hold of that O. You'll do a lot to keep hold of that O. So we'll see what's next for Michael Morales. I think it's probably time for Gilbert Burns to retire, but we'll see overall what's next for the UFC welterweight division. But yeah, another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.